Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Hotline League. Travis Gafford is on the road edition because I'm on the road, and I'm in Salt Lake City in a hotel room producing the show, and I'm going to get tired of holding this microphone because it's kind of heavy, and I don't have a stand because those just don't travel well. Anyway, I'm joined right now by my constant co-host, Mark Zimmerman. How's it going, Mark?
Going good. This week is a really fun week. It's when the off-season rumors have mostly slowed down, Worlds has slowed down, and so we have to crucify North American pros, and that's going swimmingly. Vulcan did everyone a solid by kind of going out and offering himself up as the sacrificial lamb by tweeting, admittedly, some dumb shit. And here we are.
Yeah. No, I'm happy that he gave us a lot of content to be making for the show tonight. And if anybody is watching the video and you're wondering why Mark's stuff is delayed, we don't know. It's probably hotel Wi-Fi, but it's not just on stream. It's all the way into me, so there's nothing I can do about it. So this is the show you get, and it's free. All right, Peter Dunn is here. Peter Dunn, welcome to the show. We're finalizing your worldwide tour. Actually, no, I hear you're going on the Name End podcast this week.
Am I? Okay, then great.
Wait, you're not?
Who's booking your shows?
I might be.
Okay, somebody told me that you were coming on, so the fact that you don't know is, it's concerning.
All I could say is that there's a very short period of time when I'm not attached to a team, so I can say whatever I want without being disciplined. So that's
really
not
how it works. Like, you can't say whatever you want because the new team will also be like, if you said something that's going to piss off the new team, it'll be a thing, right?
True. If there is a new team.
Yeah.
Again, looking forward to having a fun day today. As you said, there's been lots of content. I saw you at the Magic the Gathering Magic Fest this weekend.
Yes. So here's where things have been for me. So I came out originally I booked originally for Salt Lake City because I was going to go to Dragonsteel Con, which is Brandon Sanderson's convention. It's happening. It's been happening the last 2 days, and this is my dedication to all of you. Right now across the street, directly from the hotel that I'm at, not to dox myself, is the convention center where Brandon Sanderson is giving his closing ceremony speech celebration party for the Lost Metal releasing, which is right here as I pull it up. And I am doing Hotline League anyway with all of you because I don't take entire weeks off. It's impossible. So we're doing this. But go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, and I haven't read Wax and Wayne series, so
Yeah.
I'm not waiting to read it either currently.
Yes. Well, it's not about the waiting to read. It's about the fact that I could be listening to Brandon Sanderson speak. But then I found out that there was a Magic the Gathering thing happening in the same convention that Brandon Sanderson was part of. He was also part of the Magic Gathering thing. And they hooked me up, the MTG Summit, they hooked me up with a free creator badge or whatever. So I did that, which was very fun. And I met a bunch of cool people. A bunch of awesome creators, Dana and Matt from EDH Rec, and the professor who does a YouTube channel called Tolarian Community College. He was very nice. He followed me on Twitter, which I thought was very cool, so I followed him back. It's been a good week. So, and tomorrow I may or may not be creating content with somebody who I really like, but I'm not holding my breath because this person's a busy man and I don't know if it's going to happen. But it's been a really good couple of days. Thank you for asking, Peter, because Mark never asks. You're muted, I think. You're now using push talk and you have your sensitivity pushed up. So I don't know how it is that I'm on the road and my stuff is so much more understandable than you're at a family member's house.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, shout out to Alienware and Grubhub for sponsoring the show. We're going to talk more about them in a little bit. But Mark, how you been? What's been going on with you? How you been taking your time off?
Pretty good. I have basically been doing Blame Game, Hotline League. I did one other thing yesterday, last week, which hasn't come out yet. I mentioned it before, though, the Ultimate List thing. And then this week, I have jury duty.
Oh yeah, how's that been going?
So I didn't know this is how they do it in LA. I did jury duty once before in Massachusetts, and over there, what they do is they just tell you to show up on the day, and then you show up for a little bit.
Yeah,
and
you get to check
or not. Yeah, in LA, at least, maybe it's all California, but like you have to every night basically check to see if you're going to get called the next day. So I haven't checked tonight yet. I technically can. Maybe at some point during the break, we'll do a live jury duty update and see if I'm called in for tomorrow. I've dodged it on Monday, Tuesday so far, hoping to dodge on Wednesday. Other than that, I'm working on my side projects. Those are going well. Having fun with that.
What are those side projects?
And I can't tell you, otherwise there'd be pressure to actually finish them as opposed to just dick around on them. Also, pro players might not have souls. For North Americans, we need to figure that out.
You made this joke already at the start of the show about Vulcan.
So I think that's all we're going to talk about today.
No, we'll talk about other stuff. So I did an interview with John Needham that there was like a ton of big stuff that came out of that. Nothing too big, I shouldn't say. It's not like they announced like the next 4 years of Worlds or whatever. But I think there is some interesting stuff. So, and we didn't talk about that on the last week's episode because it was not out yet. So if there was anything in the John Needham here, this is the part where we give you guys all pro tips on how to get onto the show. Obviously, pro player lazy, blah blah blah. We can talk about that. I think Delphi had a really good version of that she wants to talk about on the show as a caller. I don't know. We'll see. And then also anything that you thought was interesting from the John Needham interview. I mean, it was 50 minutes long. We talked about a lot of different things. I hope that some of you found it interesting. And then I think there was there's the roster rumors to, you know what? The last time we did the episode, we could not talk about, it's not that we couldn't talk about it, but we couldn't talk about it because it was not something I put out there yet. The whole Double If Bjergsen reuniting at 100T thingy, potentially. So there's a video on my channel. You can go watch that. I'm not as sure about Speaka being part of that anymore. It might be Closer. I don't know. I haven't heard which way or the other yet. But so that's another thing we can talk about. Any of the other roster stuff.
We should do a community poll of which jungler you want with them. Speaka, Closer, and who was the third option? Santorin?
I mean, I never said Santorin was one of them, but yeah, he's obviously one of the people that's like moving around.
What was the third? It was Speaka, Closer. I saw a third one.
I didn't say. I've never heard this, so
maybe I'm mistaken.
Roxa, Svenskeren.
No, I haven't heard this stuff, so I don't know what Mark's talking about. But
I'm probably just on drugs.
Yeah. So anyway, there's that. There's some other roster rumors. I'll be honest, like I think we'll have an interesting show, especially because we have Peter on, and Peter, you always say some interesting, thoughtful things. But I've been kind of enjoying being on the road and getting to avoid all this. The majority of the players are lazy thing. Like it's just such an annoying conversation, and I hate that we have to have it tonight, but it is what it is.
I have another angle that we can also go, and it's sort of different because right before the NA Pros are lazy thing took over, there was the Rigby, Lyra, and Cloud Templar thing.
I mean, that's what started the Pros are lazy thing.
Yeah, but like it was like the Pros are lazy thing was like a small portion in like a larger thing, you know? And then obviously because Vulcan responded, that's kind of like what blew up. But I was actually going to talk about coaching in the East versus coaching in the West, and I thought that was going to be a really interesting lane game this week because I have some hot takes about it a little bit. And then obviously the pro player being lazy thing took on more of a name, and because I'm trying to stretch blame games for the rest of the season, I'll do the pro player being lazy one this week and the coaching one next week maybe. But maybe since Peter's on, we can talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah.
East versus West is really fun. If you want to do East versus West, I've got a lot to say about that.
Well, so East versus West is every time you say East versus West, everyone wrings their hands about it. I know there's differences, like coaching in the LCK is not the same as coaching in the LPL, and like coaching in Europe is not the same as coaching in NA. Just saying, like broadly speaking, some differences.
Coaching top esports is not the same as coaching Edward Gaming. You know, it's very, very different.
Changes from team to team as well.
Yeah, we'll be able to talk about that. I think it'd be nice if we could, because then Mark can just steal that content for the blame game. And like, here's a clip of Peter Dunn saying something. We're very efficient with our content creation here, especially during the final 6 weeks of the year or 7 weeks of the year, where we are. Guys, we talked about the audio sync stuff. Please stop talking about it. And if not,
You should just put a text thing over my head saying Mark is desynced.
yeah, maybe.
It'll save your sanity in the long run. You should do it.
Yeah, I don't know. It drives me crazy when people show up like after the show started and start bringing up stuff that would be obviously the case since the beginning. Papa Smithy. Okay, so let's start. I don't know. We guess we can talk about what we're doing. Actually, Peter, let's talk a little bit about you. What's your next job?
I'm enjoying off season. Podcast guest. That's what I'm going to be doing for the next
few months. Do you
make
much money doing that?
Not as much as one would hope.
Maybe, he can't afford a microphone because he doesn't make any money in his current job.
Oh, that's true. If anyone would pay him, he would buy a microphone, but everyone just uses him and complains about his microphone, but doesn't give him any money for appearing.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah. No, okay, so you can't say what your next job is, even though I think it's already been reported.
Well, I mean, I'm not on the GCD, that's all I'll say.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Okay. So that means he's still up for grabs because he hasn't signed anything. Because once you sign something, then that's when you have to do it. So people can go beat his current offer.
No one verbally agrees to anything prior to signing.
What did you? Exactly. So going broader on the Lyra Rigby stuff, what did you think of that, Peter, as a former colleague of Rigby?
What specifically about it? Because there was
all
a
of
lot
it.
of stuff said.
All of it. Were you just like, this man doesn't know what he's talking about? Were you like, oh God, he's saying what we've all been saying behind the scenes? Like, I don't know. But what was your take?
I mean, I know that Rigby and Lyra are very close friends, and it's good. It's good that they finally got to talk to each other again because, at Worlds he wanted to do the Hi Lyra thing in his notebook, and Carrie kept giving him.
Oh yeah, the cups.
So I'm glad that they finally got to meet up. It's pretty hard to meet up across oceans in this day and age.
Yeah. Mark, people are confused about what you referenced.
Oh, Rigby told a story. I don't remember where I saw it now about how he on the world stage had written something in his notebook about Lyra. I think it was just Hi Lyra or something.
Yeah, it was Hi Lyra.
And he was going to show it to the camera when it was on him, but then Cowrie, for some reason, had a cup on his desk and just didn't want it there. So he just reached backwards without looking to try and hand it to someone. And then Rigby just kind of took it, and then he didn't have time to show the Hi Lyra thing.
Yeah, and then there was a second cup. I think there were 3 cups, right? Because it was cups within cups. So he kept being given cups on the stage. So yeah, he never got to show it.
And that's why Cowrie's supposedly going back to Europe because he's disrupting the broadcast too much. Okay. No, okay, but what did you actually think, Peter? When you look at that stuff, I know I'm sure you don't want to throw anybody under the bus if you disagree, but I don't know, were you surprised by how candid Rigby was in particular? I don't know. What do you think?
It's hard to say, right? I think a lot of stuff was lost in translation, positive and negative. Definitely because, I've spoken to Rigby since, and it seems that there was some nuance that was a bit missed.
I mean, I can imagine that because that shit happens all the time on Reddit where people transcribe something or whatever, and there's just a lot that's missed.
Yeah, I mean, so much was said, so I'm not deliberately trying to dodge the question. It's just I don't want to talk for an hour whilst you've got callers on the waiting list. But
callers.
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who are very interested in hearing what a Korean perspective on the Western scene, right? So you could tell that I think it was people are very interested, and he is more equipped than maybe any other Korean coach, except maybe Reaper, to have an opinion. And obviously Reaper is going to be working esports next year, I assume. Whereas Rigby has 2 years off, right? Or 1.5 years off because he has to go to the army. So he was in a unique place, maybe, that to give his opinions without maybe fear of repercussion that others might face in a position such as his own. So it seemed very, very candid. Obviously, I don't agree with every single thing that he said, but I see a lot of where he's coming from, and I agree with a lot of what he said. Like about the environment. We're going to talk about LCS teams later. It's very interesting that everyone is dogpiling on Vulcan because one of the things that he said specifically is that EG did work very hard. I mean, he's not saying that we worked the hardest you could possibly work, but EG, I think it was very clear who the three hardest working teams were in summer. Like if you asked anybody, people would have said TL, CLG, EG, right? Were clearly the three hardest working teams. And in spring, it was obviously EG, right? Like it was just clearly EG. So a lot of those things which people are ascribing to NA pros as a whole, and using Vulcan as a convenient target dummy, maybe they're targeting the wrong people. That's what I would say for that. So.
I mean, I think Vulcan did everybody else on the LCS, all the other players are solid and taught them never be honest because the community doesn't like that.
So actually, when I saw the Vulcan tweet, I actually thought he was taking a dig at Steve.
I thought he was being for the TL Steve at first too.
It's because you guys missed the original tweet, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't see initially who he was responding to. I just saw like other people responding to his tweet at first. So then I had, you do that thing where you see a bunch of replies about Steve, and you're like, wait, why are we flaming Steve?
Yeah,
and then you go
to
Vulcans, and you go in again.
Yeah, Steve caught strays, unfortunately, very unintentional strays.
Everyone named Steve caught a stray.
Yeah.
I mean, Vulcans had a nice victory over Reggie, a fun one at Jack, and now he's got one on Steve. So
yeah,
good on him.
All right, so I think maybe we just hop into callers.
I guess. So we should say as well that it'll be a little bit earlier of a night because Travis does want to party hardy with all the Mormons. And so that means he has to get out of here slightly earlier than usual, right?
Yeah, I think instead of ending at 9 Pacific, we'll end at probably about 8:45 Pacific. It's not because I need to party. It's just because I actually have to prepare for something tomorrow. But yes.
You guys are going to go out and slam some glasses of water?
Yeah, that's...
anyway,
Mark, let's move on from less religiously affiliated topics and onto the calls.
All right, fine. There's a lot of people in here, so I won't do the usual spiel. We got plenty of topics. It's a spicy night. It looks like people are looking forward to this a little bit. So I'm just going to go out right away. Let's do it.
Awesome. Off Mark goes to grab somebody. Thank you to Numi for gifting a sub, Zypher for the 10 months, Jordasaur, a little Numi gifting a sub to Cambards, Magi, Topple the Nun, Pacho McPotch, a Wrath for gifting to Delfino, Invert, Meiswer, and it looks like Mark is back with our first guest of the night, which is Delfino. Delfino, where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm calling from Orlando.
So, Delfino, I'm a little nervous because earlier you messaged, or I saw in the chat, that you had like sort of your thoughts on this topic, and you wrote like a giant Google page worth of stuff.
Okay.
So I'm hoping, hopefully, that you've distilled it because I didn't have time today to talk to you about how to distill it. So, what's your take?
Okay. Well, my take is that for like a lot of the people calling for NA pros to specifically grind solo queue aren't really considering like critical information that's like honestly public. And I think that's why Vulcan kind of lashed out like that and why it's kind of like unfair to criticize the pros in that sense.
Okay. And what is this public information?
The solo queue quality is considerably worse. It's been confirmed by pros both in NA and internationally, right?
Yeah, but we have Champions queue.
Oh, that's actually 0.1.5. Champions queue quality is better than solo queue, including Korean solo queue in some people's opinions, but it's harder to play because you can't you have to comms. There's no flaming, there's no pinging, there's nothing like that. You have to actually like focus up and play well, and it's not in like an end all be all, right? Because like obviously because it's smaller, the queue times are going to be longer. There's going to be longer queue times for certain positions, and there's still problems with it. But I do believe that pros should play Champions queue a lot more.
Okay. And then what else you got on the list?
Okay. I want to shout out Hina for this one. She kind of introduced the idea of the do and be barrel spectrum. They're both world champion, successful players, but it's like 16 to 18 hours of solo queue a day versus like 4 to 6, right? But they're both extremely successful, and I want to I have an analogy that kind of emphasizes how like people learn differently and people improve differently.
Okay, go for it.
So like you guys, like nobody knows this about me because I don't really kind of share it on the internet. But
Well, you've only called in once, so people don't really know you in general. But continue.
I mean, okay, well, I used to swim like on a really competitive level. I was going D1 and then I quit because I burned out really badly, right? But like it's kind of like a swimming analogy. Like, so if we're comparing like a lot of yardage sets, like 3,000 yards, just like straight up swimming. If we compare that to solo queue, and then like sprint sets, which focus on sprinting, to like other types of improvement and learning, like grindy sets, they're really good for like distance swimmers, right? And sprint sets are better for sprinters, right? But you want to do grindy sets for both types of people, but just some people improve from doing a lot of like yardage often, right? But like as a sprinter, you're not going to improve from doing a lot of yardage often. So my thing is that it's obvious in basically every other sport that people learn differently, but I feel like people don't understand that in the league community. Like not everybody learns from just grinding solo queue nonstop, right?
I would say we have plenty of sprinters in solo queue.
Yeah, plenty of
sprinters
in solo queue.
He said that in chat.
Wow, you stole it.
I had to get him back after he went after you for no reason.
Continue.
So like kind of the TLDR of my point is there's absolutely things that NA pros can do to improve, but people trying to call them out without considering all of the public information is super bad faith, and players are bound to lash out about it. And also, like, think about your criticism before leveling it at competitors that you don't really know that much about.
So one, I appreciate this take. I have a couple things that I have to say. I guess I'm going to go backwards through the list. The way that people practice and learn differently is absolutely true. There's plenty of research on this outside of competitive things too, just like learning in general. And I think the thing I'll say in the league ecosystem is that the players who are able to win world championships without playing pretty egregious amounts of solo queue is the exception more than the norm. So I don't think that is like, I wouldn't point to Barrel and be like, just be like Barrel, guys, because, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but I think some people do take this perspective where it's like, if you interviewed the majority of world champion players and asked, how much did you play League of Legends every day?
They played a lot. Yeah.
Most of them played like 14 to 16 hours plus. Some of them absolutely disgusting amounts. Going all the way back to like 2013 through like 2014, 15. I remember reading interviews by the Samsung guys, Samsung White, Samsung Blue, Samsung Galaxy, T1, like just all the way almost like Doinby guys. Like not every single one on every team is like this. There is a spectrum. But almost all of them put in pretty insane hours, except for the rare exceptions like Barrel. And so while some people can do that, it doesn't seem to be the norm that you can reach the heights that Barrel has reached with his methodology.
Absolutely.
Few people have been able to do that.
I completely agree that there's not a lot of people that can do that, but I think it was less of like a normal thing and more of this is an example of somebody who succeeded by doing something different.
And that's why I don't flame Fudge for like the 1v1 practice a ton. I think there are times where he should have been making advantage or making use of the other tools available. Like I would have liked to have seen him in Champs Queue before being 0-3.
Yes, I was going to say he joined up right before the final day or whatever. Yeah.
But like the majority of his practice being 1v1s, I don't hate that necessarily. And like, it was working for him. He was the best top in North America, and so like not for the entire year, but for like portions of it, doing his practice methodology. And so I don't universally want to trash Fudge. I do think that when the moment came, I wouldn't mind seeing him try and get some international experience in Champions Queue. But yeah,
I mean, just add on to that as well. It's worth saying that a lot of the approach to Champions Queue, maybe we can go into Champions Queue topic a bit later, is that NA pros ask for Champions Queue, and now that they've got it, they don't use it. But it's worth saying that I don't see Fudge ask for Champions Queue. Like to my knowledge, it's people like Doublelift who ask for Champions Queue, right? And in fairness to Doublelift, he has grinded Champions Queue basically more than almost any other player in the region, right? So if he was to become a pro, as is rumored, and then he suddenly stopped playing Champions Queue, it would be appropriate to question, why he asked for it and then didn't use it, right?
No, but Peter, I think
yeah?
it's fair that we for like a decade or close to it, we heard all the players say like solo queue sucks, that's why we don't do it, blah 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 blah, and then people are like, okay, cool, here we've presented this opportunity, and then when you don't see, yeah, you're right, maybe people shouldn't target Fudge, but I do think it's fair for fans to be frustrated when they're like, wait, this tool that everybody thought was going to be really great just isn't getting used by you guys because you don't want to be on voice comms. Like, I think it's a fair frustration.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that there's a wider point to be made here, which is that I think that maybe fans, and I've said this multiple times, have the wrong impression of what Champions Queue should be used for. In my opinion, Champions Queue is a tool amongst many tools that have been lacking in North America for many years for upcoming people to challenge for places at the top, right? It's an access point for new people coming up, right? And putting the problem that North America has had for many years is that the bottom-up pressure on the top pros has basically been non-existent. Now, there's many reasons why this happened, right? But you can say imports. You can say, all kinds of other things. But it's very clear that the opportunities for pros, for potential pros coming up through the NO ecosystem just hasn't existed. It's Five Fire in Europe. If would have. There's no world where Five Fire wouldn't have been given an academy spot, like a full-time academy spot, before kind of he's retired or doing whatever he's doing, but he's not playing League of Legends full-time anymore, right? He won literally everything in amateur for multiple years, and he never got a shot, right? And in any other region, except maybe Korea, right? But if you're like a really, really talented upcoming player in Korea, and you don't get a shot in the Korean league, you go to LDL, you go to like PCS, you go to all these other options, right? But if you were in Europe, you would go to an ERL team. If you were in LPL, you wouldn't have to go through the academy system. You could go and join one of the other teams in LDL who are not affiliated to an LPL organization, and you would just beat those guys and demonstrate your skill level, right? But there was no option for players like him to come up and demonstrate their skill level, right? And this is what Champions Queue and the new Proving Ground formats allows for, right? Now, the problem is when you are the top player in your region, right? Every amount of effort you put in to get better is so when you're at the top of a skill set, it's very hard to learn more. It's very hard to learn, right? Like the amount of effort you put in for each percentage point of improvement is much lower than somebody who's practicing against you, right? And this is, it's just true in all industries, right? You can learn through duplication, you can learn through imitation and things like this, right? So generally, when a region wants to be competitive, it's generally the people who are coming up and pressuring the people at the top, threatening to take their jobs, threatening to challenge them for titles, for other awards. Those are the people who in any other region would be challenging the top pros, and that's what Champions Queue does, right? Champions Queue gives you an outlet if you are one of those people and you want to come and improve. It gives you the option. It gives you an improvement tool. Now, it's
wait, does it though? Sorry to cut in, Peter, but I'm a little confused because I don't feel like Champions Queue is so exclusive that it doesn't really allow many people to challenge the top, right?
I mean, I think it's too exclusive, right? I think that the problem with Champions Queue right now is it's trying to fill a number of different roles. To be honest, for me, Champions Queue is kind of a reward for amateur players for competing in the amateur circuit. I mean, that's how it looks like right now, because the top 16 amateur teams are the only amateur players who get to go there. Even if you're like an insane solo queue player, you have no access to Champions Queue unless you compete in the amateur circuit, right? Whereas what it should be is it should be a tool for people to get themselves noticed, tool for people who want to grind to be able to grind. And the problem is that because of the bottlenecks on certain roles, right? If you are a solo laner, you can play as much Champions Queue as you want, right? But if you're a jungler, you're an AD carry or support, you can't. And obviously at Worlds, they found answers to this, right? They found priority queue, and I assume priority queue will be introduced into Champions Queue next year, right? But exactly, right? I think what fans want to see from Champions Queue is they want to see Bjergsen playing against Jensen every single night, and seeing who's better and having, really hype team games, right? But that's not generally what's going to happen over the course of the season because it's not anonymous, right?
But the thing I'd push back on a little bit is it's not just fans who seem to want that identity for Champions Queue. It seems like a non-negligible portion of the vocal pros want Champions Queue to be a low queue time, but really only the best players around me playing. And the problem is that those people, or maybe not them specifically, but there's not enough pros playing consistently. So then you get a lot of amateur and collegiate players trying to be put in there, and then that pisses off. Like, this is what Core JJ was talking about, and like it's just this like vicious cycle where like not enough of the really good pros play, so you get these people who are probably fine, but get tilted by the pros who are still playing, and it's a low quality game in their mind, and then they don't want to play Champions Queue, and then they leave, and so like either you lower the floor further to get realistic or like good queue times, and then when the good pros come back, they're pissed off because this fucking no name is in Champions Queue now who came from the ladder. And so like I think the problem that Champions Queue has a little bit is an identity crisis between being a discovery tool and a proving circuit, which is what I think you want it to be, and what pros want it to be, not just fans, but pros want it to just be 100 players from Academy and LCS only. But then most of them don't play it enough for that to be the cutoff.
But do all pros want to do that, right? Like there's some pros that want that, and those guys play a lot in Champions Queue. Core JJ plays a ton of Champions Queue, right? River plays a ton of Champions Queue. Closer plays a ton of Champions Queue, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that all pros wanted to be that, right? We have to be really, really careful about tarring all pros with one brush because, they're not all the same person from the same point of view, and they're not all hypocrites, right? If you treat the entire body of pros as a single voice with a single unitary opinion, then it's very easy to say this is hypocritical. But it's not every single person who's saying that, and the people who are saying that want it to be one thing. And I think this is the problem you have with Champions Queue right now, because it does have an identity crisis. It's not clear what it's for, and if you want it to be a practice tool for pros, flood the thing with players, and then have priority queue, right? Like make pros have higher priority. Academy players have secondary priority. Academy and LLA pros have secondary priority, and then you won't have the queue times. You'll have shorter queue times, right? For the people that want to practice, with essentially players playing fill, right? Like amateur players playing fill. But that's not what it is right now. Everyone has equal priority. People queue in different roles, and you get situations where the queue times are really, really long because half the good mid laners aren't even in Champions Queue because they didn't play in the proving ground circuit to get in. And so you have like 6 mid laners holding up 14 supports or something like this, right? So, and that causes longer queue times, which makes people less interested, right? So you need to be really clear about what this is a tool for doing. And for me, what I've seen by being in other regions is the way that people push at the top it's very, very rarely top down. It's people from the bottom having tools to get into the system and force their way up. This is one of the reasons why, I've enjoyed working with rookies so much for my entire career. It's because those guys are the guys that have come up, thought, okay, I can be better than this, I'm going to do it, and then they're very motivated, and then they come and raise the bar. And you see this happen in Europe with people like Humanoid, people like Kaiser, you see it happen in NA with people like Jojo, and that's the thing that's one of the things that NA has been missing, because there's always been a bottleneck from amateur to academy, and then from academy to LCS, and this is one of the tools to help alleviate that bottleneck, in my opinion, even if it's not what other people seem to want.
Peter, I just wanted to let Delphi get a word in because she wanted to say something about 5 minutes ago. Delphi, what were you gonna say?
Well, I kind of I didn't really forget, but it's kind of not relevant anymore. It was like after Mark was talking about how a lot of pros didn't want to play against I just remember from a player's stream, he was like, yeah, some of my teammates were saying they don't want to play against collegiate and amateur shitters in Champions Queue, and that's why they didn't play. And then I remember a later stream, he was like, the same teammate was complaining about longer queue times, which is kind of just like kind of backing up Mark's point
because
about
pro
like,
players are dumb, and I'm doing what I'm not supposed to do and generalize them all. But like, they don't sit there and think logically about it. They're just like, oh,
this
what
feels
match?
bad. Here's why it feels bad. In any given moment, whatever made them feel bad is the problem. So it feels bad that I have a queue time. It feels bad that my teammate's not a pro player. And it's like, do you realize these are correlated?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
of course not.
it's definitely
But
I can talk about pros and that stuff, but I won't.
I mean, there's so much to dig into here. I mean, we could go forever on just this one call. I feel like because the pro player angle is one that I think they're under fire right now, and I don't want to pour more gasoline on the fire, but there is, I think, some truth to a lot of all this stuff, both in terms of like.
Well, I mean, I think one thing that Peter said that I thought was really smart was pro players are not a monolith. You cannot just say LCS pro players. There's like 50 of them, right? And then you have all the people in Academy. And I was talking to some pro players about this not off the record, but just like anonymously, I guess, and asking them like, okay, tell me, no camera in front of you, just tell me what you think of all this. And they're like, yeah, I think it's very disingenuous because people just sort of say all pro players are these lazy people that aren't doing anything in North America. On the other hand, like this person's sat on teams before where they saw pro players like not solo queuing and got very frustrated by it, right? And I think that's one of the challenges is that people should recognize is you have a pretty wide spectrum of people putting in effort and motivation into this league, and it must suck pretty bad to be somebody who's like grinding. Maybe you're on a team where other people are not grinding. You miss worlds, you feel bad, and then you go online and everybody's just like, you're fucking lazy, even though you've sacrificed like a shit ton of time and stress and energy and psychological health to the blood gods, and then people are like, you didn't bleed enough. Not for my entertainment.
I mean, I will say that this is like, it's a funny thing to correlate to like the wider ecosystem of like America, I guess, like the entire country.
Here we go.
I'm just saying, anytime you point out systematic issues, there are of course people where those like, you're not who we're talking about. And like the not all pros, not all this, not all that. I won't say the group names everyone knows I'm talking about just to avoid turning this political, but like, those people always chime in like, well, not me, guys. And it's like, great, we weren't talking about you. We're talking about like the broader problems that exist in the ecosystem systematically, and I think for those pros who are putting in the hours and are working hard, it feels bad to feel like you're getting lumped in with that same group, but like, that you put the work in and that this doesn't apply to you. And I think it can sometimes detract from the conversation when you that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Do people know that Vulcan is one of those pros that was putting in the work? Because it doesn't seem like they do.
No, they don't, because this is the frustrating thing. Like, this is one of the reasons I hate this conversation, is because fans and the community are not interested in nuance. They are not interested in like looking and seeing which teams are players. All they are angry. And so Worlds comes around and they go, oh, we lost, that's a bummer. And then Lyra and Rigby come out and talk about this giant fucking thread. People narrow in on one part of it. Vulcan, unfortunately for himself and the other pros, adds some fire to that by being frustrated about it. And then like you go on Twitter and the great example of this was Medios tweeted like, oh, I'm just so tired of seeing about this conversation every year. It's so exhausting. I retweeted it, and then my feed was full of a bunch of people like, of course pro players are tired of hearing about it because you guys are all lazy. It must suck to hear about how lazy you are at your job when you're just trying to paycheck steal and stuff. And I'm just like and again, I realize that that's similarly not the entire community, but it is exhausting because I don't actually think there are nuanced conversations happening about this, and people just want a resident sleeper through it and then wait till next year when they can be like, yeah, you guys are fucking lazy, and be like upset about it.
I agree, but like if you don't mind, could I talk about like the club Templar earlier?
Sure, yeah.
For a second?
Sure,
I tweeted
this
about
is going to be 80% of the conversation tonight, so let's just dig into all of it now.
Yeah.
Okay. I tweeted about this, and I'm not gonna go super in depth about it, but it was insane to me that they talked about like systematic issues within management and coaching, and then like if you read the Reddit post, like the solo queue part, the players not playing solo queue part was maybe like 10% of that post, and that was the only freaking thing that anybody wanted to talk about. I was like, this dude just said like coaches are actually incompetent and cannot coach their players properly.
Yes.
And you guys want to talk about solo queue? It was insane because like obviously we know like we can see the player solo queue counts, whatever, but like that was a conversation brought by a former coach, and nobody wanted to talk about it. It was so strange to me that people just narrowed in on that one part.
That's what I was saying, is that my blame game talk was initially going to be about coaching and kind of like the rest of that post before it got kind of consumed by the pro player thing. The final thing I'll say, just to backtrack a little bit to what Travis was saying about like the lack of nuance, I will say, and we have other takes about Vulcan and stuff, so I feel bad that like I'm probably eating some of the callers' topics here, but like we're driving, so let's just
set it up.
Like,
you're bridging to the next call, Mark. It's a segue.
Sure. My segue is that pro players don't do themselves any favors when you respond to the criticism in this way. If you want nuance, you have to give nuance. And I love Vulcan. He's one of my favorite people in the whole scene. I don't think he's an idiot or a bad person. Like you said, he's probably frustrated reading this shit, and he just fired off a tweet. Everyone's done that before. I have made really bad tweets. But like, I can't get mad at my audience for me sticking my foot in my mouth. So like,
Mark,
on that point, if you want nuance, you have to give nuance.
Do you think, Mark, that it would be helpful if teams produced, I mean, I could just say content and then end the sentence there, but I was going to say anything that shows anything about how much of a challenge it is to fucking go somewhere. And again, I'm not saying they need a weekly documentary show, but when here's the fan experience. To defend the fans, here's the fan experience. Watch LCS. Watch teams play LCS. Never really see much from the teams or the players. Watch teams go to Worlds. Watch team lose Worlds.
3-15.
Say nothing. Go 3-15. Teams players say nothing other than whoopsie.
Shut the fuck up, Steve.
Post no content. Refuse to elaborate, and then go to the next year to do this again. And like I think there's a world where fans could become more sympathetic if you tried to create any kind of relatability or sympathy for the actual grind that these players do go through. Because right now, like, I know what it's like, Peter knows what it's like, Mark knows what it's like. Fans don't know what it's like because they get nothing that tells or explains or reveals any of it. So, I don't know. Fuck the teams that decide not to do content, I guess.
I agree.
A final olive branch.
I've got one side point I want to put on this. Firstly, whenever people try to say things like this, they get shit on, right? Like, I remember Danny in Spring Split getting really, like, some of the stuff that Danny was getting in Spring Split before playoffs was, like, unacceptable stuff to send an 18-year-old kid. It's just, like, unacceptable to do that kind of thing, like, from what I was seeing. He never made a big deal about it, but, sometimes you see things when you're over somebody's shoulder. And, like, that kind of thing, like, I mean, holy moly. And it's more socially acceptable to do some of those things in North America for some reason. I've got no idea where it is. But fudge, there was an important point I wanted to make here. Okay, but when you're talking about who should be putting in the effort, right? Like, I think it's,
Wait, Peter, we're trying to wind down the call, and you're just opening up a whole other segment.
But this will be the last thing, and then I promise I'll draw it to a close. Like, within a region, the thing that pushes the region forward, right, is how hard the teams that are challenging for the top challenge people at the top, right? And again, I'll just stress this again because this is stuff that Rigby has said. This is stuff which the EG players are too self-conscious to go and say. Although I should think that they should highlight how much they work, right? In Spring Split, no team worked harder than EG. That is why EG got to the top, and that's why EG won in Spring Split. In Summer Split, there was literally 1 day gap between Houston and flying to Korea, and then we had to be, after 4 days after MSI, after we were eliminated for MSI, we had to be back to do Riot content, right, after 4 days, 5 days break, from the end of MSI, and then there's an expectation that these guys should go and push as hard. Like, that's absurd. Like, the calendar is completely absurd for teams that go to MSI. And then, despite all of this, I go and see my team working, really, really hard. Like I said, CLG, TL, EG were the 3 hardest working teams in summer. And then I see these guys working harder than players on other teams that should be challenging them, that should be pushing them day to day, that should be pushing them in Champions Queue, that should be pushing them in scrims, that should be pushing them on stage, not give a shit. And then who's the one that's being targeted? It's Vulcan. It's a complete disgrace. Okay, and like that's what I would say on this topic. The community is targeting the wrong people because the people who are willing to say anything are the ones, like, anybody puts their head over the parapet, they get immediately targeted. Right, and that is very, very, very frustrating to see as somebody who knows what's going on behind the scenes. And that's the last thing I'll say on that topic.
So that combo well with what was going to be my final thing too. As I was going to say,
Wait, you already gave a final thing.
No, I didn't.
You literally said, "Here's my final thing."
I'm going to extend an olive branch. Is
okay.
My final thing to the pro players, because I was bagging on them a little bit earlier. The olive branch I'll give is that anytime I have tried to go on the side of pro players and how hard they work, people often don't want to hear it. And they just assume you're wrong, or that you don't know what you're talking about, as if I don't know people with normal jobs as well. Like,
dude, the Reddit thread where the person was like, Vulcan shows up, gets to do whatever at 10 a.m. And then like
Vulcan pulls his pants off and plays scrims, whereas working man Steve spends 3 hours in a commute.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, it was the stupidest thing I've ever read on Reddit.
Anything involving facts just go out the window when you have this conversation. I was like, I forget the context I tweeted this initially, but like I was just like pushing back on the idea that pro players are lazy. I think there's an argument to be had about working as hard as your contemporaries, which are the other people in other regions, which is a different conversation than just calling pro players lazy, which is what I don't like doing. And pro players can be made fun of for a lot of reasons, but the vast majority of them do put in, and this was the tweet that like people started arguing with me about, as I said, the vast majority of pro players put in more work than the average person. And you can link the numbers for average work hours in America by different sectors, by different, like levels. And like, for the most part, pro players are going to be bigger than that. And like, people just get offended that you use numbers and like actual things. And like, this is not me calling those other people lazy. I'm not saying you're lazy for having whatever schedule you have, but like anytime that you try and explain the pro player angle of like how intense the grind is in season, especially when you're in a team's position like Peter's team, where you're flying across the country and not at home and like, doing all this stuff, not across the country, across the world and whatnot. Like, I think people don't understand that. And then again, it boils down to other things, because you make this one claim and then people move the goalpost, like it's happening in Twitch chat. Most people aren't working a passion job. It's like, great, I didn't say that. I just meant purely in terms of like amount of time. Of time. It's the only number I'm using. It's the only thing I'm talking about. You can bring whatever other things you want to bring in. Don't move the goalposts. I said one thing. Anyways, that's my olive branch, is that it's very hard to get the people who are on the outside to appreciate the work that goes on the inside.
I see it in Twitch chat right now. It's so annoying. Okay.
Yeah, people just take it as a personal attack if you cite numbers.
Delfino, anything that you want to say as we move on to a quick break?
Oh, like, I definitely think it's really unfair to pros, but I feel like there's not a lot of nuance given. I agree with that. Anyway, I want to shout out Maya, LCS Miracle on Twitter. She's making really cool graphics for all the teams, so you should definitely give her all your leaks. And I
honestly,
also want to shout out,
teams should just contract her out, because the C9 one that I saw was really, really good.
It's really good. She's really talented. And I also want to shout out myself, obviously, December OLI on Twitter, and I want to shout out the Anyman podcast. We're having a fun episode this week.
Do you know who the guest is?
I don't know who the guest is. Does Peter Dunn know who the guest is?
No, it's all right.
Okay. Delby, at this point in time, I'm not sure if Peter Dunn actually does know who the guest is.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried for you.
Know what he signed up for. Yeah. Peter just said yes to every single person who was like, want to be on our podcast, and he did zero research on any of them. Yeah. He has no idea what he's doing.
He's going to be appearing on Joe Rogan later this week and be discussing...
He's like, wait, where the fuck am I?
Yeah. But Peter, you don't think your players should get vaccinated, right? Okay, anyway, thank you so much, Delphi, for the call.
Yay.
And we'll catch you
me on.
next time. Okay. So,
Thank you.
I love how quickly my point was proved as well when I said what I said, and Twitch chat exploded about it.
Yeah. No, exactly.
It was thank you guys.
I also
don't know
like it's so disingenuous too, because like as much as like I think Vulcan's point, though poorly phrased, like I understand where it comes from, because like the Reddit poster who's like defending this theoretical Steve that exists out there is also not Steve. Like this Steve or whoever it is that the Reddit poster is creating, they don't have time to go. If they're working as hard as these people think, they're not spending all their time on Reddit arguing about this shit and reading what Vulcan's tweeting in the middle of the week and coming out and writing these giant things. Like
to defend the guy who wrote the Steve thing too, like he was responding to Vulcan initially. I'm sure Vulcan read a lot of things that like pissed him off and whatever that Lyra thread was with Rigby and stuff. But again, like it's just one of those things where I think both sides are making pretty poor points. I have no horse in the race exactly, because I'm like I'm not on a team anymore, and my job is to just try and communicate my thoughts on the situation. But like, it's a mess. It's always a mess.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, before I do this quick ad, I just want to say, I think it's very. I want to. I think her name is Mira, that Delphi was mentioning, but if maybe I can go find this. I don't Mira, but they made like a really cool. Maybe one of the name and people can post it in the chat. They made a really awesome graphic about like the C9 roster, and I think that it's Maya, and I think that they're gonna do one for all of the team rosters as they get like basically as locked in as they normally are. And I just think it's fascinating that like this is cooler than a lot of the stuff that I see come out from teams. I'm gonna see if I can put it on the screen right now. And I think that this is, in my opinion, like the next wave of the LCS. As we see teams like start to not invest in content and not invest in like creating cool things from the, I don't know, for on their own things. Like I feel like fans are just gonna have to pick up the slack, which feels kind of shitty, but also like people forget that this whole scene was built off of grassroots community stuff, and so I just like I'm probably gonna. I know I always say I'm probably gonna make a video about this, but like I do think that there's something to be said here about guys like these teams are pulling back on a bunch of shit that they shouldn't be, and so I'm hopeful that all of you open up and start helping to make sure that the scene keeps going, because
to pile onto that too, like a lot of the iconic league videos were not made by teams or like personalities. They were made by random community members who had a cool idea and made the thing. Like the Double Lift Man of Steel video, like that wasn't made by anyone, right? That was just like some random. I shouldn't call them a random, but like, you know. And then like some of these people do turn out. Like G-Bay ended up becoming like a league personality, but a lot of like those OG content things were just people doing what they wanted at first.
Many of you are more creative and more committed and more invested than the people that seemingly are working in and running this industry at this point in time.
Travis and I just fucking show up and collect some money for this podcast.
Exactly. And we're actually creating content. So think about all the people that aren't, or the teams and companies that aren't.
How much lazier they are.
Yes, exactly. Travis Gafford wakes up at 6 a.m. in the morning. Meanwhile, I don't know, whoever at whatever team.
I actually do wake up at 6 in the morning, and I make Ashley breakfast, and I drive her to work, and I come home.
All right, we don't need to hear day in the life Twitter of Mark Zimmerman
for 3 hours.
But all I'm saying, I'm trying to inspire the people out there to show up and embarrass Riot Games and the companies in the space that are not doing as much as they could by your own amazing talents. Because I believe in many of you. All right. But not all of you. Anyway, let's talk about Alienware, a company I completely believe in, because right now I'm using their Alienware X14, which is actually, can I show, I don't know how much space I have on these cables, but like this computer right here, this is what the whole thing is being run off of right now. Look how thin and wonderful and delightful this computer is. I'm holding it with one hand. It is.
That's an entire control room right there.
Yes, this is the control room for this show. Which is actually
Industries.
It's actually kind of impressive. So I just would go check them out. Alienware.com/Travis. They sponsor us, and their hardware is actually awesome. I mean, like the computers, we have yet to drop a frame. Now, sometimes when you drop frames, it's from the hotel internet. So if we do later, possibly that. But I'm looking at XSplit, and it's like not even maxing out the CPU and the GPU, and it's, the fans are going pretty strong right now, but they're not. It's not super loud. It doesn't feel like it's going to take off or anything like that. So, I don't know. I just go check out the X14. It is my favorite notebook I have ever had. I was kind of nervous that it might struggle for this show, but it's doing fantastic. And they're going to have a bunch, I'm sure, as always, Black Friday deals coming up, if they're not already up on the site by the time that you're looking at this. Going to alienware.com/Travis. Please, if you are purchasing something from them this holiday season through this Black Friday, whatever, alienware.com/Travis, if you use that link, a portion of that goes back to TGI, and that's very much appreciated. So thank you so much to Alienware for sponsoring the show. Mark Zimmerman, would you like to go grab at 8 o'clock our next caller? Off he goes. Thank you to Invert, Wrath of Khan. Oh, I said some of these folks already. Robert Bruce, Numi gifted another one. Tree Bird. Numi's just giving me back the money that I gave her for working, and that's funny. Okay, Jay Schroed, Spencer Neutron for 56 months, the Masta Mellow Jello, and it looks like Mark is still not here. Kanoke, Pokemans, Puprup, who subbed and then gifted 5 subs. And right. Ika's here. Ika, where are you calling from?
Most important question of the night. Are we going Scarlet or are we going Violet? Pokemans, what are we doing? Scarlet, yes. No, just kidding. Violet. Wait, Violet's the future.
Which starter?
Wait, is this
cat? Green cat.
Is this Ika? Your name says Ika on my screen. Are you something else?
No, I'm Ika.
That's okay. Yeah. Mark was screaming about Pokemans or something, so I was confused. Okay, where are you calling from, caller?
When I came in.
Where are you calling from, caller?
West Virginia.
West Virginia. Okay. And what do you want to talk about in the show?
I believe that if the mindset of Vulcan is the mindset players have at large, then we should simply focus on the LCS as an entertainment product, separate from the world stage.
Okay, so when you say the mindset of Vulcan is the mindset of players at large, you mean like North American players or global players?
North American players. I think the LCS has a lot of financial incentive for players to prolong their career, and that may not necessarily be the best path towards being the best necessarily. And I think with that in mind, and with the given state of current state of play, it makes a lot more sense for the LCS to gear itself towards being a bit more I want to say self-important, but I understand that seems kind of
looking inward. I'm guessing what you mean.
Yeah.
It's really about.
I mean, focusing on have the prestige of the league be winning the league, not going to Worlds and going 3-15.
Okay, and when you talk about financial incentives, can you dive into that a little bit more? Because I am kind of curious what you mean.
I mean, I don't think you can blame a player like Vulcan for not burning themselves at both ends of the candle if it means giving up a high 6 to low 7-figure salary for another year or two.
I think go ahead.
I mean, I wouldn't do it, and I don't think anyone in chat can honestly say they'd do it.
No, they would all tell you that they would do it. Okay, so
you don't get it.
Yeah, they just can't because they're working their 6 to midnight job.
Oh my God, Travis is picking a fight with.
No, I just find that analogy stuff so disingenuous. No, but okay, I think one of the things that's confusing to me about this take is like even in a world where the LCS was isolated from global play, like we just decided we were never going to compete in an international event again, you would still have significant financial incentives to be the best in the league, because the delta between the payments that go to players on the top teams versus players that are like hanging out on the bottom teams, I can tell you is quite significant.
Sure.
And so I think that's what's a little confusing to me. It also kind of assumes that like Vulcan is, I don't know. Whatever. I don't want to get into like.
Well, Travis, let me ask you. Did you read Vulcan's follow-up 1 a.m. thoughts?
Yes.
Tweet?
Yes. Where he was like, he was talking about like, yes, I could do all this. Yes, I could do all this, but at what cost? And essentially implying that like he might shorten his career by a year or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the caller's point more so, is that like if you're the best in your region, and you're beating everyone, and like you could over the course of a split spend 2 more hours every single day or something and sleep less or not do the thing that relaxes you or whatever. But Vulcan's saying that it's going to probably shorten my career if I do that.
Isn't this kind of... See, I guess I find even the logic of that a little confusing because these guys do get challenged by each other, right? Like, we see so much roster mobility every year that if, like... Why is it that... Shouldn't the core JJs of the league be forcing Vulcan to practice harder? Or is that your point, Ika, that like everybody's kind of just satisfied if they can get top 3 or 4, they're just satisfied with that, they're not going to push harder?
I do think that's the case. I think they're kind of satisfied with a certain level of play that will continue to net a paycheck, which is fine. Like, again, I can't blame them. And, truthfully, I don't think the league is set up for them to be able to challenge like the DRXs of the world or the T1s of the world. I just don't think that's something that's practical, at least not consistently. And so with that in mind, I think taking some of the edge off of that and shifting the focus towards entertainment as opposed to just trying to be the best would be better for the players, and I think it would be better for the league. Because, frankly, at this point, anyone who's left caring about Worlds is, I mean, come on. It has to be a little bit brutal at this point.
So there's 2 parts to this. There's obviously the like, what should the league's overarching angle be? And then there's also kind of like what Vulcan's saying. To finalize my thoughts on what Travis is talking about, like the Vulcan thing, I think people put in variable amounts of effort across the season, depending on if they're losing a lot, if they're winning a lot, if they feel challenged or not, if it's playoff crunch time, if it's the middle of the season. Players will prioritize different things, and it's not like they're just consistently doing the same thing across the entire year. And I think, to Vulcan's point, some of the people who are talking about this kind of mental health angle and protecting the longevity of their career, it's that going full throttle as much as you can possibly handle 100% of the time is more likely to cause a crash than, I don't want to say coasting, but like finding the moments in time where you can let off the gas a little bit and hopefully head into those higher period of times more refreshed. Whereas as I understand it, a lot of the LCK teams, it's basically full throttle all the time, and if you're not doing that, they'll just find someone else who will. Not everyone, not all teams, of course, there are differences, but like Core JJ, there's a video that everyone, I'll shout it out again at some other point, but the interview, and I'm sorry to do this, Travis, but the interview with Ashley Kang and Core JJ is like every North American fan needs to watch that video. It is
I have no issue.
It almost 100% aligns with my thoughts on the situation. It doesn't cover the entire ecosystem question, but it does give like an insider's opinion who has been there at the top in both North America and Korea and can talk about the differences of the scenes and has very insightful answers. Core JJ is just a very intelligent human being. He's very eloquent. And that video is like going to give you more context than anything else is going to. So watch that video. And I think that's just like my perspective a little bit, is like Vulcan saying there's times where, he could maybe ease off the gas a little bit and that'll help him in the long run. And maybe, that's what he's prioritizing over like full throttle 100% of the time until he crash out some burnouts. Whereas in Korea, everyone does that. And then the people who just have like the mental edge of like, some people just don't get burned out as easily. Like Caps is someone in the West doesn't burn out as easily. Faker seems to not burn out as easily. Like those players are the only ones who can change sustainability there.
I mean, I think also it's worth just going on the Worlds point. Like, I think that domestic success should be valued higher because Worlds is not a level playing field. And this is what people don't realize, right? There's systematic, unique, let's call them qualities within each system, which handicap, like what you're seeing at Worlds is it's a contest of teams, but it's also like an indication of structural differences within the regions, right? And if there is a certain region that is at a disadvantage, let's say North America, for instance, or let's say Brazil, these are isolated regions. They have no, the structural issues in North America are very, very, very serious. Being able to win in those circumstances is something which should be celebrated. And sometimes, how would I say this? You wouldn't expect Denmark to win the World Cup. right? Like and I think that maybe people in North America have been sold for a lot of time that NA is Brazil and NA is not Brazil in League of Legends, and that doesn't mean it can't be entertaining. It doesn't mean that it can't be. It doesn't mean that there's no value in North America, but you know, until you put the structures in place to make your league as efficient or as groundbreaking or as innovative as those other regions, it's very, very difficult to compete with those other regions. On Vulcan's point about burnout, if people think that this is the practice schedule which has gotten Vulcan to the top, right? Like as far as he can reasonably go, because remember, there's only 2 international tournaments a year. If there's such a problem with that structure, why has nobody come and taken his position from him, right? Why is Vulcan, like, I don't think there's anyone that would say that Vulcan is not a top 2 support in NA, right? So, if you don't think that Vulcan deserves his job, or you don't like how Vulcan goes in positions, then find the next person and champion the next person who will behave in the way that you want to come and challenge him and come and take his spot, right? And, I said this before on the Champions Queue topic, it's not easy within certain systems for people to find international success, and it's not as simple as saying it's a cultural issue, right? It's just not. So I'm sorry if that's not a very detailed response to that topic, but that's just my perspective.
I just continue to think it's a false dichotomy.
What do you think about, to the caller's other point about like pivoting at least how the broadcast and the ecosystem around it talks about it, to focus less on the world's angle in the competition? Because like you said, we're not Brazil, but there's also, I feel like a lot of the traditional comparisons don't hold up in the sense that like there are alternative products readily available to English speaking audiences who want to watch competitive League of Legends. Yes, there are some time zone barriers for the LCK, but the LCK product is quite good for the English channel, and the LEC exists. And so I do think that there is a more worthwhile, it's worthwhile considering the risk of pivoting your product away from the competitive angle.
Can I quickly throw a point to that?
Yes. You guys can hear me,
I think
right?
a
This
good
thing's
example
on?
of that would be like the
Hello?
Canadian Football League exists independent of the NFL, and like college football championships obviously do very well in ratings, and no one has any illusions that those teams would hold up in a Super Bowl, right? Like, it's just not the same quality of play, but those leagues do what they can to make those games feel important, and that is something I think the LCS could do better about, because I feel like at a certain point it's like, well, okay, but they made top 3, so they made Worlds, so
Yeah, I mean, the ecosystem for collegiate NFL is a can of worms we can get into with like alma maters and like a lot of stuff like that. But I think is the CFL popular? I have no idea. So like this is me asking legitimately. Is it at all comparable to the NFL, or do a lot of Canadians who like American football just watch the NFL?
I don't know that it is like a 1-to-1 by any stretch. Obviously, the NFL is clearly quite a few steps above everything else, even in the sports space. But I mean, it does fine. It's been around for probably, I don't know, longer than I've been alive.
Real quick question, caller. Can you explain to me what, like, your version of the LCS that's focused on entertainment looks like?
Content. I mean, I don't usually disagree with your take on how the league should prioritize things. I think more content, more emphasis on storylines within the league. I wish teams would quit just swapping rosters around to try and get one more win at Worlds. I'd rather have some continuity so I can actually follow things and enjoy them. I mean, frankly, the last, I would say 2 years, if it weren't for, like EG being somewhat interesting this year, I really prioritize LEC at this point. I went to the LCS finals this year. I had a lot of fun. But on the whole, like week to week, it's way too difficult to follow, and I don't think the ends justify the means. I don't
Okay.
think importing the next best Korean support's going to enthuse me to watch any more than, say, having consistent rosters and storylines that I can actually invest in.
Okay, you know what? I thought for a while that I didn't like your take. You know what? I really like your take.
Oh my god.
No. Here we go. So here's the thing. What have we done in the league for a while? We have teams have given full, from what I understand, full control over to the GMs. And what have the GMs done? They've created rosters that just fucking fail internationally over and over and over again. And we have sacrificed roster stability, content, because, as much as people say, oh, these guys don't work hard enough, if you talk to any of the teams and people like that, it's like, oh, they're working too hard to do content. You have sacrificed the upward mobility of North American players within their own league. You sacrificed all this stuff, and for what? 3 and fucking 15. Either the GMs are bad at their jobs, or we can't actually do this. And so I kind of think maybe it's time to pull back on just going full throttle on everything competition, because if you can't actually pull off more than 3 and 15 at Worlds, then why are we sacrificing everything we can so that we can get 3 wins at group stage?
I just want to be clear here, Travis, that I think this take is way too defeatist. I think when I was saying that NA is Denmark, I didn't mean that NA cannot win any games at Worlds, right? I'm not saying that we should just give up on. We should give up on.
I'm not saying we give up, Peter, but I'm saying maybe we don't need to swap players every 5 seconds every year because we somehow think that just one more import, please, if I could just get one more import, I could get out of groups.
So maybe I used the wrong analogy by saying Denmark. But let me go with a better example for
I don't know enough about
Denmark,
right?
And
what they do, but go ahead.
But okay, let's say the Netherlands. Okay, the rather than aspiring and behaving as if you are Brazil, or as if you are Argentina, or as if you are Italy, right, or France, NA should behave as if it's the Netherlands, right? And that's smaller population, fewer financial resources, but how does this country continually push above its weight, right? It finds ways to innovate. It finds really good tools for developing its own talent. It has really good systems in place. It has really good structures, has huge development and focus on coaching stuff, right? Like the Netherlands pushes far above its weight internationally in terms of what coaches can contribute, right? And this is how you find success in all conventional sports, right? It's a pattern that happens time and time and time again, right? How smaller countries with lots of disadvantages against them can compete against the big guns at international events. And my issue with this take is, yes, I think you should develop on your own systems, but look, I don't want to treat this as a defeatist take. I think you should stop behaving as if you're Brazil, start behaving as if you're the Netherlands, and if you understand what the Dutch model is in football, it's very, very obvious what the next step is. Focus on developing your own youth talent, have foreigners, bring them in as spice for the team, but work on the fundamental flaws within your development system, right? And when you look at the Netherlands and you look at their model, what are they doing? They're developing young players, they're putting investment into coaching staff, and they're making sure that there's opportunities for people to rise within the system. And that for me, that for me is the issue with North America, right? There's no simple fix to this, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all answer, but the answers that people are coming across is the answers that you would use to solve an issue like the Lakers not being able to win the NBA, or Brazil not being able to win the World Cup, or the US not being able to win enough athletics medals at the Olympics, right? Which is not to just throw money at it. It's to fix your infrastructure and to make sure that you have an infrastructure that develops talent and that promotes opportunities, right? And that may seem like a very simplistic take, but this is just how things work in international, in international sport. You see it time and time again, and the wrong solutions keep being proposed because people keep treating North America as if it's on the same level as China and Korea, which it's not yet. And that's an issue. So that's how I would go with this take. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. It pisses me off. The most frustrating thing I've ever seen in a single interview is when FBI won the won the LCS, and he gave a winner's interview saying that it didn't matter that he just won the LCS. All he cared about was Worlds. And I just could not believe what I was hearing when I heard that kind of thing, and indicates the problem, in viewership retention. If the players don't think it matters, if the orgs don't think it matters, then why should the fans give a shit, right? And I think to me, yeah, that's the stance that I have on this subject.
I disagree completely, Peter. I think we should hire people like Portillo to become the GMs from now on, and instead of looking at solo queue rating, look at engagement on social media platforms and build teams based off that.
Actually, just hire me and I'll hire content staff instead of the new shiny support looking for a retirement plan.
Hey, see, I think we're not too far from each other on all this, even though we're, everybody here is having big rants and reactions and stuff like that, and chat is all over the place on us. I think we're not too far, because I think what we all seem to agree is that the current, we haven't heard as much from Mark, but what we all seem to agree is that the current system is not actually that tenable, and that the solutions so far have sacrificed the entertainment value of the LCS for not very many wins and not very much success. In fact, not really any success. And Peter is suggesting that the way that we've been trying to do this is not the right way. And I am suggesting that the way we've been trying to do this doesn't work. And so is the caller, it sounds like. So it sounds like we all kind of agree. The problem is I don't think that that's what this offseason is going to yield. And that's what makes me kind of sad, is that I actually just think I think we are done doing things like let's pay perks $1 bajillion. I don't think we are done yet with a lot of the other stuff, like roster moving dramatically and importing instead of native talent and stuff like that. Yeah.
I'd say if the way to judge if NA is on the right path is if Busio and Tenacity are in the LCS playing on good teams. That's how I would judge it. Yeah. That's the measure to see if there's any hope for NA. If they're not, then I give up.
They will be in the LCS, but I don't think you should just focus on those two players, Peter.
Sure, but just as an example of people that should, because they've been blocked for multiple years, right? So
sure.
Tenacity especially.
All right. Thank you so much to our caller. We're going to say goodbye to you. Anything you want to shout out before we say goodbye?
Shout out to Peter. He was a lot of the reason I was actually able to watch the LCS this year. EG was really the only point of interest I had for most of the year. I think it's going to be pretty tough this year to really find something to sink my teeth into with the product, but here's to hoping. And a shout out to Poppy Fox. He sat with me at Worlds, helped me out a bit. Good guy. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the call, and we'll catch you next time.
Yep. Bye.
All right. I think we do a Grubhub ad right now, actually. Shout out to Grubhub. Thank you so much to Grubhub for sponsoring Hotline League. I'm probably going to Grubhub stuff right after this, actually, because a lot of things in Salt Lake City close early, at least the stuff in walking distance from where I'm at. So I'm probably going to Grubhub stuff because Grubhub is awesome. They've been sponsoring us throughout this whole year. We are hopeful that you love them and that you will show that love to them. I don't have a code for you this week, but stay tuned. They did give us some more Masterwork chests to give away, so we're going to try to do that over the next couple of weeks. But when you use their service, when you tweet at them, when you let them know that you're doing it because of us, that stuff is very helpful, especially around this time of the year whenever we are talking about next year. That's kind of how these things get signed on an annual basis. And so we'd love to have them continue on as a partner because they've just been so amazing. And a lot of you have shown your support to us, and you've mentioned to Grubhub how much you've appreciated them, and I think that's great. I know you all know already about the Grubhub guarantee, where your food is on time at the best price, or they will make it right. So thank you so much to Grubhub for sponsoring the show. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to sign up if you haven't used them yet. I know a lot of you use some of these competing services. Just give them a try. And if you do through that link, it's actually very helpful for us. So thank you so much, Grubhub, for sponsoring the show. All right. Let's do another call. Mark is already off. What else do we got? We've got 2 more callers. It's going to be a bit of a shorter episode. Shorter with long topics, I guess. It's time. It's time, DLNA Uzi lol. You have trolled my chat for so long, and that was the final straw. I'm so sorry. We'll see you in the next life. Okay. Trevor Monreal, thank you for the 21 months. Papu Machina, thank you for the prime. Benjamin, Maury Wakes, Pro Star, Cheeto, One Step Closer, Crayon, The Slatherpost for 2 years. Danny Grimm gifted out 6 subs. Wow, thank you. Badger Yar, Photo LOL, and It's Volks. And it looks like Mark is here with Mike Spam. Mike Spam, where are you calling from?
Just outside of Seattle.
Just outside of Seattle. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's cold here, which is unfortunate.
It's really cold in Salt Lake City. How cold is it there right now?
Most mornings when I get up and go to work, it's below freezing now. So
yeah, no, right now it's 31 degrees here, and the highs have been like 37. I can't wait to get back to LA. Although I like Salt Lake. Anyway, what do you want to talk about on the show?
You guys sort of brought it up earlier, but what I put in the topic chat was that I don't have a lot of sympathy for players and teams who complain about being called lazy when players and teams spend most of the year not part of the discussion, and then they come around and say, hey guys, why are you calling us lazy at the end of the year?
So when you say not part of the discussion, can you elaborate?
Yeah. Again, you guys sort of brought this up, but we spend most of the year talking about how is NA going to do at Worlds? How is NA going to do at Worlds? We get to Worlds, we don't perform, and then we have the annual NA, like, why did we lose fest? And then that all happens, and then after that we have players come out and say, hey guys, stop calling us lazy, here's all the reasons why it didn't work out for us. Which annoys me, because we spend the entire year with all these issues, right, that these players know about and don't get leaked to the public, or don't get reported out in the public, or don't get mentioned by players. And then at the end of the year we hear, well, actually there were all these systemic issues that held us back, and so if you knew about this, your expectations for us probably wouldn't be that high in the first place, right? That's what Vulcan's follow-up tweet was. It's, here's all these systemic issues that made it so our practice could not be at the same level of other regions. There's all these systemic issues, and it's not like these systemic issues all of a sudden were just figured out by players, right? Like, we found out about the issues with LCS scrims through Mr. Peter Dunn here in a podcast interview he did, right? Like, or maybe it was a Reddit comment. I don't remember. But either way, like, the North America has terrible scrim culture, and here's the facts, comes out at the end of the year, right? Fans are completely in the dark, and then we find out at the end all these systemic issues. Why are we not hearing about this sooner, right? And I realize I'm ranting and rambling, and I apologize for that, but it's hard for me to then have sympathy for when players come out, and friends of players come out and say they're not having their side told, when they've had all this time to get their side out there, and it's now that we've failed, do they feel the need to come out and defend themselves?
Peter Dunn, Twitch chat said you have something you want to get off your chest.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I completely agree with this take. I mean, like, if you don't say your side of the narrative, how do you expect people to properly understand you? And I think people don't say it because they're worried about backlash. Like, frankly, I mean, it's really obvious which team I'm talking about when I say that certain teams in the middle of, at the top of LCS don't give a shit, because they've actually come out and said that they don't give a shit in the regular season. But, okay. Don't burn too many bridges. But it's super obvious which team I'm talking about. What I would say to this is, if you don't say your side, it won't be said. And, this is one of the reasons why, things like Hotline League are really good avenues so that people can see inside, like, the thinking of teams, right? Like, a perfect example of this is Jizuke. Jizuke got shit on for, like, the first year and a half of his time in North America, and nobody, like, defended him or told his side of the story or anything. Right, so of course he just keeps getting shit on. He keeps getting shit on because people don't see what he's doing. Like, he doesn't make an effort to go and show, the little bits of specifics. And, this happens time and time again. Like you just sit there and you just take it and you're just quiet. And okay, yeah, I agree. I agree that it should be the responsibility of people to come and say this. Now, who should say it? Should it be the players? Should it be the coaches? Should it be the orgs? That's an interesting question to have. I don't have the answer to this. And I'll be frank, like being somebody who's willing to come out and say this means that you get a ton of backlash, like a ton of very unpleasant backlash. So I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but like people should be more brave to come and do it. Just accept that there's going to be backlash. I don't know who. Though.
I don't even think there has to be backlash. Imagine if
in
4 months
North
ago,
America, there will be.
well, but imagine if 4 months ago, 3 months ago, someone goes to Travis, right? Travis gets this scoop from an anonymous source that's, here's how much time players actually put in. Here's the truth. And yes, you know what? Travis is going to get backlash for defending players, but players aren't getting backlash for defending players. And I do think how the community at large reacts to what players say versus what quote-unquote sources say are meaningfully different.
I mean, I think it's a very rose-tinted opinion that people won't get backlash for some of this stuff, whether internally or from fans, as well as like a lot of these topics have been talked about before quite a bit. And I don't blame newer fans for not knowing them because there's a churn rate. And for people like Travis and I who don't want to hit on these topics again for like the 8th time in our career in the middle of a split when there's other storylines to talk about. So there's some reasons that it doesn't come up earlier, I think, as well as the fact that there is this feeling that people will say, shut up, put up or shut up kind of thing, which I see all the time when people talk about some stuff. Heading into MSI or whatever it is in spring or in summer, you kind of get this like perform at Worlds or we don't care attitude from fans sometimes, which I think to Peter's point is egged on by sometimes players saying that themselves that they don't care about LCS. Like winning LCS is not always built up to be the accomplishment that it should be to make it feel like for players and fans like, hey, we did it. Awesome. So like, I think there's a lot of things playing into it, but I ultimately agree with the sentiment that there should be more discussion and things like I put my video out about how I don't like NA's scrims system. I think it's really dumb. I put that video out after we were eliminated from Worlds. Maybe I should have put it out earlier I've had this problem. Jat and I have been talking about this on and off for like 3 months at this point, basically in summer. Like maybe I should have made the video. I mean, I don't know if I have the power to actually enact any change, but like maybe I could have argued and made teams feel bad for doing one scrim block of 5 games. I think it's dumb. I think we copied G2 for no reason. I could have said that earlier. Like, I don't know.
To be clear, I think the biggest offenders here are the teams. Like, if I had a player who was getting public hate for being quote-unquote lazy, as a team, I would feel very compelled to not necessarily address it head-on, but maybe put out content in the next week that shows much of a hard worker that player is.
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
You're going to replace the player in 6 months anyway.
True. You know what? You're right. My bad.
Travis is being facetious, but I agree with this point a lot, is that like there are indirect ways to combat this other than the confrontational ways that seems to boil over at the end of the year or like in these posts by Rigby and stuff. Not that Rigby or whoever is wrong to talk openly about it, but like you can show your team working hard. And I know there's the EG files, but those are like, I wish there was like some middle ground between full-on docuseries, which are I think a little too heavy, and just like fun content that shows pro players.
No one goes out and fights for the player. That's what I've been saying for a while, and I just think it's really disappointing.
God. Travis is stealing from Twitch chat audio listeners on the podcast afterwards.
I mean, the joke is who said it in Twitch chat.
Yeah, Peter
okay.
said it.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, I agree with this stuff. I think like teams just don't really have PR people, and they don't really have like I think in the LCS you have a great deal of people who are marketing or content people, and they've just become sponsorship fulfillment people, where it's not about how do I make content for the fans or how do I make content to help tell the story of these players. It's just, all right, we've sold this to X chair company and we have to deliver 10 of these over the course of the split, so that's what we're making. Oh, they're not performing? Okay, well, just tell the sponsor that they're performing great, or just spend and buy impressions. Blah. So I don't know. I very jaded tonight. I don't know why. I'm very positive about the LCS, but I think perhaps the frustration around having to have this conversation is so annoying. Thank you so much to micspam for the call. Anything you want to shout out?
The new TFT set, all right? It's set 4 again, all right? This is so hype. Like, I'm so excited. I'm going to lose 1,000 hours into TFT again. My
Nice.
life will be in shambles. I am beyond hype. They've hit it out of the park.
Thumbs up. Thanks so much, Mike Spam. I'll check out TFT because you've recommended it. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks. Peace.
Bye. Okay, we got one last caller to go. Thank you to Ellie Belly for the sub. Really appreciate it. I liked the last TFT set. I'm sad it got flamed. I thought it was pretty good. Okay. Peralt says it's boiled down to how can I make my metric. Yeah, I think some people. Yeah, you got a lot of salespeople making the decisions around what the content is rather than the content people. That's a separate discussion. Washi is here. Washi, where are you calling from?
Tampa, Florida.
Tampa, Florida. What do you want to talk about on the show?
Yeah, so I think C9 dropping Jensen was a terrible idea. I know C9 is known for getting new players to bring up, which I think they've done a great job at, and it's absolutely awesome. But I feel like the general consensus was that bringing Jensen was a great move. He proved that in summer, and to some extent, Worlds. Previous history is better, but I just don't agree with the decision that. From both a performance and a branding angle to get rid of him. And on a broader scale, I feel like throwing veterans aside like this will have lasting effects since they won't potentially want to sign for new or different orgs given this specific circumstance and his performance.
Are we
and
sure that
how
C9 dropped Jensen?
it seems like
I mean, it's been reported that Diplex is probably,
but that doesn't necessarily mean dropped, right? Like, and that, by the way, I'm not implying that I have any separate information, but his contract ended this year, and so there's I've just noticed this is a trend among like the community to see a contract or to not recognize a contract end date means that like a departure could go both ways.
They also picked up someone else though, which doesn't bode well for his circumstance.
Well, I think Travis's point is that Jensen might have not wanted to re-sign,
or
to him, and they're like,
or Jensen could have been like, maybe I'm going to check out the market and see what's out there, or maybe C9 was like, we're only going to pay you half of what you wanted before, or what you were making before, because the market dropped. So like, sign now, or we're going to go pick up somebody else. And he's like, oh, I think I'm worth more, and then he doesn't sign. Like, I think it is important to recognize that we don't know always how this stuff goes down.
We don't know for sure, but his deleted tweet did not sound like a player who was excited to be in free agency again.
Oof.
You want me to talk about Jensen, or do you want me to talk
I'm
about
looking at the
people
chat who said, because people are saying Jensen's contract was for 2024. Okay. Here's where I'm coming from. What I will say is I need to go double check a couple other things before I continue on with the discussion about the 2024 stuff, because I had heard that he was able, like he had an out potentially at the end of this split. Maybe I misheard from people, but that's where my confusion was coming from, because I did not think that I think he had an option to go out or something. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, I don't know enough to talk definitively on this. But regardless, let's just say they dropped him. Fine. Fuck it. Fuck C9. They dropped him. Let's just go with that premise.
Sounds right.
Yeah. Sure. So you think this was a mistake, caller, and you think it's because of how good Jensen is?
Well, that and I mean, for sure. But I feel like it also diminishes like veteran player and brand value. He's always been held in very high regard, and yet he was expendable here. It's like I scratch my back, you scratch yours kind of thing. And he came in midway through the season. He got C9 to Worlds, and then he's dropped right afterwards. And it feels extra bad because he used to be on that team for multiple years, you know? So it just feels like this sets like a standard of being expendable, even no matter performance, veteranship, you know? So, yeah.
Isn't this
Peter
what
Dunn,
C9
I've missed your tour because I've been playing Magic and watching Brandon Sanderson talk. Why is the whole chat going on about you and Jensen?
Let's just say Jensen. Let's just say that Jensen has never done me any wrong, directly, personally, or in any other way personally. Whilst I've been in North America, although there's definitely there are a lot of people, lots of Jensen fans who've definitely caused me a lot of pain in various situations that I don't really think is appropriate to talk about in this call. But basically, I think I got more death threats from Jensen fans than any other fans I would in NA. But Jensen, Jensen didn't set his, like crazy fans on me or anything, right? Um, it's hard for me to be completely neutral in the Jensen situation. I think that it's worth saying. I think it's very harsh on Jensen for what happened over the course of the year. It's very telling, though, that even in times where Jensen was brought in, the response from several of his teammates was very lukewarm from people that weren't blabber, right? It's very telling that, Fudge, I remember, gave an interview. One other person gave an interview where they were like, "Oh, I didn't really think that much of Jensen, but Blabber convinced me," and things like this. I can't remember who it was. Was it Fudge or was it Sven? But I remember
Fudge
there was
said
another
something
team.
about that. I don't think Sven said anything. I don't remember. Maybe I can't remember, but Fudge definitely said that.
Fudge said that. Okay, I couldn't remember, so I don't want to tar Sven with that. But it's very telling that he had a lot of work to do to convince his teammates that he was worth it right from the start of the split. When you join a team, that's not the first thing you want to hear from your teammates in a public interview about you joining the team, right? If you are considered like a very important key part of the team. What would I say about him otherwise? I mean, I think he did his job. I think he helped C9 get the title, right? C9 haven't won. Well, okay, they won with perks, but they looked a bit rough in spring, and he helped them get the title. I think maybe rather than it being a case of Jensen not being good enough, maybe it's a case that they just think Diplex and Eminez are better, right? And what I would say about Eminez is he has like almost Caps level of hands, but has been kicked off multiple teams in his career. So maybe Cloud9 have found the way that they can get the best out of him. But that guy is crazy, crazy good. And, I'm excited for him to be in NA because he will help Jojo get better by playing against him in Champions Queue if he doesn't get banned from Champions Queue. He's public, like everyone knows it, right? Like he's basically the most toxic person in existence. Okay, that's too far, but he's been kicked off 2 teams, right? On Diplex was I've been helping a European team out in this off season, and Diplex was definitely one of the top European mid laners that was around. I think that he was very, very hyped at the age of 17. If you'd asked me who was going to be better in 2022, him or VTO, I would have said him. But I think that for whatever reason, Vitality haven't been able to get the best out of him. So maybe Cloud9 see something there. But this guy was hyped, not quite to Caps level, but was hyped to like Humanoid Nemesis levels when he was coming up. But his career's kind of stalled. So maybe rather than it being Jensen wasn't good enough, it's a case of they think these 2 guys could be incredibly good. And I think it's a bit harsh on Jensen considering what he gave to the org, but I mean that's how it is. I mean I don't really have anything anything more productive to say than that. But it's not. It doesn't necessarily have to be a case they think he was bad, but maybe they just think these guys are better.
The story of North America. That guy's not bad, but this other person that fans don't know about is even better.
This guy from somewhere that's not America. Let me tell you about him.
Or Canada. It's a North America region, Mark.
What the hell is a Canada?
Again, we're not trying to sound xenophobic. It's more just, I don't know. I got to do the video about the what the act of importing is, just so that I can link people to it.
Travis,
people think that we're being like,
here's your problem. Whenever you do one of those videos, they're very dry, they're very serious, they have high presentation value with like numbers and graphs and stuff. You just need to just go buy a boomerang and get in front of a green screen and do your Twitter boomerang thing, the image, but make a fucking TikTok troll ass video about boomeranging players in and out of the LCS and make it a 1 minute troll video, and people will realize how many people are boomeranging around.
Do I get a boomerang, Travis?
Weren't you?
You were here for 2 years.
Yeah, you were here for 2 years.
Oh, so that's okay. So where's the boundary? Is it 18 months? Is it like 12 months? Is it?
I mean, honestly, these days, if we could get 12 months, it's pretty good. They usually show up in November. They usually show up. They show up in February because they missed the first several weeks of lock-in because they're getting their visa, and then they leave in August after they, don't, or September after they don't qualify for Worlds.
It's if you've been put on Exodus here and you're just waiting to leave again.
Yeah, it's an 8-month vacation. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Is it's not about immigration. It's about tourism. That's why I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm anti-tourist.
We're not anti-immigrant. We're anti-tourist.
Yes, exactly. LCS tourism. Honestly,
needs to end.
The LCS tourism thing, that is a pretty good joke.
hashtag stop LCS tourism.
Yes, exactly. Summit had to cut his tour short. Okay.
He's coming back?
Yeah, well.
I mean, just one final thing on the C9 thing. Like, I'm very excited to see how Diplex will do in a different environment from Vitality, right? Like, for me personally, that's super, super exciting. And Eminez, I'm really excited to see how things work themselves out with Eminez, which should be entertaining no matter what, whether the issues are resolved or not. So, I mean, for me, those two signings are pretty hype, right? Like, I don't have the emotional attachment to Jensen that maybe many of your viewers do. So for me, I saw that move, and I admit my first thought was, holy shit, they signed Diplex. This sounds really exciting. But having heard what this caller has to say, and having heard what you've had to say, Travis, I do concede it does seem a little bit, slightly, maybe a little bit ungrateful. But sure, I'm
just excited to interview Diplex for the next 8 months. All right. Thank you. Wait. Well, actually, Mark, you didn't sit. Did you have an opinion or take, or do you think we just covered it?
No, I mean, caller kind of said it when he talked about C9 usually finds people. Like, Niski wasn't the sexiest pickup. I mean, he bounced around a little bit from initially the Envy, the back over, then back to C9 and stuff. I generally trust their ability to find good players, but I also sympathize with losing what should feel like a franchise player after a relatively successful stint, Yeah. And he was good at Worlds too. It wasn't like Jensen went out there and laid an egg. He was far from the biggest problem on that team.
Anyway, Twitch chat having a good time. All right, thank you so much, caller, for the call. Anything you want to shout out before we say goodbye?
You guys are awesome and have fostered a wonderful community. So I love being in Twitch chat and hanging out with you guys in Discord. I want to shout out my Clash team, Mike, Simon, Geraldine, and Nate. Crit mode is the greatest, and I love you all, and good night.
Good night. See ya.
See you, dude. Thank you.
All right, that is the show. See ya. No. Peter, what do you want to... Just one more final thing, Peter. That's been your motto tonight. So what's the final thing you got for us?
No, just to say thank you for having me on the show. I think this may be the last time where I'll have productive things to say about NA for a time. So it's been fun. I think you've invited me on the show maybe 6 or 7 times over the past 2 years. Just to say it's been fun.
Yeah.
Continue it, and I'll be looking forward to watching your content from across the pond.
I just want to say
the World content was hilarious. I'll just say, like the Palafox thing and the how much did you pay for your ticket thing.
Oh yes, thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Did you see the ticket video?
Yeah. I'm glad Peter had fond memories of the content in it, at least.
Yes, exactly. Well, again, content. There's only one type of content these days, and it's not team content. Okay, but no, Peter, thank you. We know that you have many regions to choose from when you plan your next vacation, and we just want to say that if you would like to plan another trip to our wonderful region and enjoy our great food and our competitive pay and our good weather, we'd love to have you back. Mark, what do you got?
Blame game this week, probably coming out tomorrow afternoon. Just talking about the drama, other than that, not much. Kind of hibernating.
Yeah.
What did I watch recently? Been watching Survivor. We didn't talk about this. Been watching Survivor. Watched Black Adam. Watched I don't know. I haven't paid attention. Some
Earlier
more
today,
Chainsaw Man. I don't know.
Earlier today, I messaged Mark and I said, "Hey, we should talk about that Needham interview on the show tonight." And he said, "Yeah."
Oh yeah. Well, why don't you find me the topic that brought it up in Pleb Topics?
Okay. Well, then I blame you, the caller. Or the callers or attempted callers
Travis,
for not.
How many times do we have to? This is the exact same thing that happened last weekend. If you have a topic you want to talk about, you have to prime it to get a caller.
I thought I did at the start. I said we're giving tips on things. If I said we have we had a whole 50-minute interview. I'm sure there's something people want to talk about. Clearly, they didn't.
No, because you didn't tell them literally. You like, this is the trick. You say what you want to talk about. Someone will make it the topic. And then they know that they're going to get picked. That's why they copy. But if you just say, "Oh, I'd love to talk about the John Needham interview," that wasn't specific enough. Then they don't know what to say. But if you're like, "I'd love to talk about John Needham's response to Reddit sentiment that there's too many imports," boom, topic in there. I grab that. We're good to go.
The fans are too lazy. All right, that's why this show is failing. It's because the fans are too lazy. All right. Anyway, thanks to everybody that came up and said hi to me in Salt Lake City, either at MTG Summit or at Dragonsteel. It's been really cool. I had a great conversation with several people. Actually, one thing that was really fun was I got to... normally, like at Worlds, I'm like working, and so people come up and say hi, and I can only talk to them for like 30 seconds or less. But at MTG Summit, I was literally like playing Magic games with people that would come up and say hi. We played Commander a couple times with people that were just like... I'd be walking to go play a Commander game, and we just pull somebody that said hi to me or whatever. I'd be like, "Let's go." So that's been really fun. But yeah, thank you, everybody. Dinner with the next episode is with Steve, and that is coming out either tomorrow, Wednesday, or Thursday. I also have a video, which if I was home, I would be showing right now, which is the next surprise test. It features many people, like the return of Poe Belter and Cyan, the mega IQs, but also people like Porter Robinson and Dom Monahan and Billy Boyd. They are so fucking funny. We were like crying laughing while we were recording with them. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's the show. Thanks, Peter Dunn, for your time. Thank you, Mark Zimmerman. See y'all later.